up, you guys? My name is Aubrey, this is my channel, and today we're going to be talking about used and new car prices, because over the last 12 months, new and used car prices have absolutely skyrocketed, and I really want to discuss why this is, when we can expect for prices to return to normal, and what you should do in the meantime if you're somebody that's in the market for a car. So let's get started. Now in 2021, we are no stranger to extremely high prices. We've been seeing high prices in real estate, high prices in lumber, high prices in stocks. It is basically a worldwide phenomenon at this point. There's high prices in virtually every single industry. And I hesitate to even say it because every single time I do, you guys dislike the crap out of my videos, but I'm gonna go ahead and say it. We are in a bubble, and this is an expansive bubble that covers a wide variety of different industries, countries, and at this point, it affects almost every single consumer. And one of the biggest bubbles that we are currently experiencing is a bubble associated with vehicle pricing and the high valuation of cars. We are currently seeing record high vehicle pricing like we've never seen before. In fact, according to the Car Guru's Index, we are up 31.84% year over year in used car prices. And according to the Manheim Used Vehicle Value Index, which is an index that keeps track of vehicle pricing across multiple makes, models, and countries, we are up year over year from July of 2020 versus July of 2021 by 24.7%. But the thing is, this isn't just for used cars exclusively. In fact, we've been seeing an increase in pricing for new cars as well. The average new car vehicle price in June of 2021 was $40,206 versus in June of 2020 where the average new car that was sold cost $38,530. That is an average increase of $1,676 in a 1 year's period of time. But the thing is, this increase in pricing with both new and used cars is something that doesn't just affect the new and used car industry. In fact, this is something that is having a huge economic effect in the entire United States. In fact, the Bureau of Labor Statistics recently released data stating that inflation was higher than expected, with an inflation rate of 5.4%, 0.09% of that coming in 1 single month. And it is estimated that of that 0.09% increase, 1/3 of that came from the overvaluation of used and new car prices, which means that the high prices of cars hasn't just affected the automotive industry, but because of the impact that it's had on inflation, it's also had a huge impact on other aspects on the US economy as well, including consumer sentiment, the stock market, and more. To say that this is a problem would be quite the understatement. In fact, this is a huge issue. But then that begs the question of why is this happening and why are automotive and car prices going through the roof? And to be honest, it really comes down to a simple supply and demand. The fact is, right now, the supply of new vehicles is incredibly low, and we're going to touch on why this is the case in a few minutes. But supply is very, very low and demand is very high. And because of this, automotive manufacturers are not able to meet the demand of the consumers. There are more people wanting to buy cars than there are cars to buy, which is then driving the price up. But the fact is, there are people that need a car right now. Maybe somebody had a car breakdown, maybe they totaled their car, maybe they just simply need a new car, and as a result, they have to buy a car. Well, if they can't buy a new car because there are no new cars available, what is their next choice? It's used cars. And so because there is a supply and demand issue with new cars specifically, that demand has then trickled into the used car market, making a demand problem in the used car market and thus driving the prices higher, which has made both the new and the used car market increase. In fact, in some cases, some used cars are selling for higher prices now used than they originally were sold for at their original MSRP, which is just crazy to think about. But the thing is, this supply and demand increase doesn't just stem from the fact that there are all of a sudden a ton of people wanting to buy new cars. It's not like all of a sudden people realized, hey, I want to buy a car. That's not really what happened. Rather, there is a supply issue because of the fact that manufacturers aren't able to create their cars as quickly as they once could. And this really stems from one big problem, and that is a chip shortage, specifically a shortage on semiconductor chips that car manufacturers need in order to complete the manufacturing of their vehicles. In fact, this semiconductor chip is what is considered to be the root cause of the bubble that we are currently experiencing with the auto industry. Now, I'm not going to sit here and try to pretend like I understand what a semiconductor chip is and what it does, because to be quite honest, I don't know. In fact, I have no idea. But basically what a semiconductor chip is it is a very small chip that needs to go into the computer, into the parts of a car. And without this chip, a car cannot be completed and thus it can't be sold. Semiconductor chips are not exclusive to the auto industry. In fact, they are used in most modern technology that we use on a day-to-day basis, from cars to smartphones to laptops and more. more. But the important thing to understand here is that without this semiconductor chip, you can't have a car because it is a necessary piece of the equipment that is needed in order to complete the manufacturing of any vehicle, whether it be a Ford, a GM product, a Nissan product, whatever the case is. Well, whenever the pandemic hit last March, many car manufacturers, like many businesses in general, went into survival mode. And one of the tactics for survival for these car companies was to cancel orders for parts that had these semiconductor chips in them. In fact, car manufacturers canceled a bunch of parts for a bunch of different types of cars. It wasn't just these semiconductor chips exclusively, but these semiconductor chips were part of the cancellations that these auto manufacturers made. Now again, these car manufacturers did this in anticipation and preparation for new car sales to nosedive. But the problem is new car sales actually didn't nosedive. You see, new car sales decreased for a brief period of time, but then within a very, very short period of time, these new car sales recovered. And this was due for a few different reasons. Number one was because relatively quickly, dealerships started to adapt their marketing to the pandemic era and to the COVID era. And they did this by offering 0% financing and zero down in some cases. These were crazy aggressive incentives for people to come in and buy cars. And as a result, many people took advantage of this, boosting new car sales and increasing the demand at the time. Not only that, but many dealerships were able to pivot their marketing and pivot their strategies to adapt to a new COVID era. And as a result, dealerships started doing more online sales, dealerships started doing house calls, and in some cases, dealerships didn't even have their sales at all negatively impacted because in some states and in some cities, dealerships were considered essential businesses, which means that they were able to stay open during lockdown. All of these factors together have created like the perfect storm of supply and demand. There is this huge demand, but there simply isn't the supply to meet it. And though the supply is increasing, it is not increasing at the rate that it needs to. In fact, the Ford CEO, Jim Farley, has described this entire ordeal to be the biggest supply shock that he has ever seen in his career. So then that begs the question of when will this entire thing be solved, and when can we expect to see some car prices go back down to normal and this bubble burst? The CEO of Nissan recently gave a statement to CNBC telling CNBC that it is hard at this point to be optimistic about the global chip shortage because of the fact that it is such a major issue. But the fact is, it has to end at some point. And the reality is, depending on where you look, will dictate what answer you get to this question. Some news outlets and some experts are already stating that used car prices are starting to cool off a bit and that the shortage is already starting to come to an end. While other news outlets have stated that we probably won't start catching up with the chip shortage demand until the end of this year, so Q4 of 2021. And while the chip shortage may be somewhat resolved by the end of 2021, we actually won't see this trickle down at the consumer level until 2022. And while some news outlets say that, there are other news outlets that say that the chip shortage won't even begin to be resolved until 2023. The reality is at this point, we don't exactly know when this chip shortage is going to be solved. We don't know when used car prices are going to return to normal, and we don't know when the car market will become less competitive. But it all stems to one thing and one thing only, and that is the pace in which chip manufacturers can manufacture these chips. And once these chips are caught up, then used car prices will start to settle, as will new car prices. Now, coming from my own personal opinion, as somebody that looks at used car prices every single day for my Turo fleet, I can say that from my perspective, the used car market hasn't settled. Car prices are still absurdly expensive, and I haven't seen much of a shift off of that. But I do feel confident that once this chip shortage is worked out, at least worked out a bit, that we will start to see that trickle down to the consumer level. Now, I personally think that we don't need to see the chip shortage be solved 100%. Like, we don't need to see chip manufacturing go to 100% capacity in order to see the prices of used cars go down. We just have to see an increase in the chip manufacturing numbers, and we need to see a bit more supply to match with the demand. And we're already seeing that today. In fact, recently Ford announced that they had thousands of F-150s that had received the chip that they desperately needed in order to be sold. And as I drive around and I look at dealerships where I live, I'm starting to see more and more dealerships get more and more cars. So though supply is increasing slowly, it does look as though it is still increasing. Ultimately, when it comes down to it, right now probably isn't the best time to buy a car for the average person, especially if you're somebody that can hold off. The reality is, if you buy a new car, then you're going to be paying a premium for that car and your negotiating power has gone out the window. And even if you can find a price for a car that you like, the ability to find the exact trim level, the exact color, the exact make and model that you like is something that may be difficult for you. As for the used car market, deals are very hard to come by, and the ability to get cars below market value is harder than ever. But the reality reality is you can still find deals. It just takes some extra digging than it once did. Ultimately, if I had a guess, I would guess that used car prices are probably going to begin to decrease by the end of this year, and they will continue to decrease throughout 2022 until we hit 2023. And I think that by 2023, if not before, we will get back to normal pricing. But in the meantime, if you're somebody who's interested in selling a car, there is no better time to do it than today. And if you're somebody that is interested in buying a car, then I would either encourage you to be very patient to find the car that you want at the right price, or just simply hold off until next year. Like always, you guys, I hope that you enjoyed this video. This car bubble that we are in is absolutely crazy, and as a Turo host who's wanting to expand my fleet, it is something that I'm having to deal with on a day-to-day basis, as I'm sure many of you who watch this channel are dealing with it as well. Like always, if you have any questions, comments, if you have anything to add, make sure to leave a comment down below. And while you guys are at it, make sure to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit the notification bell. And I will see you guys in the next video.